Welcome to Unleash Your Healing Vibes podcast, where we talk about the many generational curses that can plague you. Look at ways to break the cycles, free yourself from ancestral trauma, and transform your life into the life that you came here to live. My name's Alicia Ramella, and today we're going to talk about relapse prevention. Relapse prevention for people living in addiction recovery. So, relapse rates are typically pretty high. I won't list them here as they're often difficult, to find the same thing for each, facility or website that you get on. They're varied statistics. Not to mention, it's probably underreported. Um, but in actuality, relapse is a problem in the addiction community. The reason for all of these relapses is that no one is getting to the bottom of the addiction. Most rehab facilities are often just overflowing with people, and there isn't enough staff to offer individualized treatment plans. Plus, sometimes they hire these recovery coaches who used to be addicts to help out, but they're not usually the decision makers. They're not the ones in charge. They're the ones with the life experience that people would actually want to hear from. But no, it's usually doctors and therapists with the big degrees and the textbook answers that are doing most of the treatment. Now, it's not fair to say that about every facility, um, because that's not true. There are plenty of great rehabs out there who who do have good relapse prevention programs that are saving many lives. But in fact, just overcrowded. We need more, and we need more of a better relapse prevention approach. I mean, and you can't like treat someone unless you're a doctor, right? But there are many people who have been through an addiction that are really great at helping others because they had the life experience. So, like me, I'm a recovering addict and I work with people who have had an addiction stay sober. I don't treat them, I just guide them on a path that I myself have walked. And I have seen a lot of wrongs in the approach that we have to addiction in this country and in many other countries as well. The problem I see is that people are not getting to the root cause of the addiction. The root cause of addiction is most often underlying trauma. So, people go to a facility, they're given a treatment plan that looks the same as everybody else. Then they get out and they relapse. And they often go right back to a different rehab later on down the road, or maybe the same one, and they do it all over again. And it's frustrating. I know I had more than one rehab stint in my day. So spending time and energy being herded around like cows from group to group, never really getting to do any deep diving into your soul to discover why there was an addiction in the first place. Then you're given some medication to mask everything, then you're sent off to bed at 9 p.m. to get up and do it all over again. I mean, of course, there are some people that are truly ready and they end up working on their trauma on their own despite all this. And they do get out of these facilities and they do stay sober. And sometimes they find a great therapist or counselor or, someone in the facility that they can work with some of the trauma on. But usually you have to speak up, for some of that. And a lot of people, they don't they don't know it's underlying trauma. So how do they know to bring it up? And you have groups and AA meetings, but they're not for everyone. In fact, groups and AA meetings weren't what really helped me. I didn't really get an individualized relapse prevention plan either. I was given the same thing as everybody else. And in therapy, of course, we did dig into some nice stuff. And, but I never really was like guided to look into my soul and see what exactly is wrong inside Alicia. It wasn't until later, once I got out on my own, that I really dug deep and found that there was all this unresolved trauma that had been manifesting as my addiction. I just kept sweeping everything under the rug with, more booze and anyway, so it's mainly how we can handle our triggers when they come up. That's kind of the big thing I remember every rehab talking about triggers and cravings. And while that's all good, you need to have some self care and you need to believe in a higher power. Everybody might have a different version of what God looks like or what a higher power looks like. But without spirituality, in my opinion, you're basically just going to be a dry drunk. And typically dry drunks don't make it. All of these things are great additions to recovery plan, but they're not enough. You have to ask people, what was your childhood like? When did you start drinking? When you did start drinking, was it because it felt good? Was it so you could escape? Was it because everyone else was doing it? Was it the feeling you got when you drank? How were your relationships with your parents? How were you with your friends? Is there some underlying trauma that you're ignoring that's causing the addiction to manifest? And so often it's actually generational trauma too. So it's something that our parents had that got passed down to us. Sometimes our parents or grandparents or both had alcohol use disorders. So it's easy to see that you got the generational addiction curse. But sometimes it's not so easy to see. Sometimes maybe your mom and dad seemed to get along fine and no one drank. But really, your mom was people pleasing all the time. Maybe she never got to live fully and authentically, and instead she had to work on pleasing the man of the house and the family and the kids, to keep everything going, right? Maybe trauma from her mom came down through her bloodline that said she wasn't made her feel like she wasn't allowed to be seen and heard. Maybe her feelings were not important enough to be discussed about. You know, trauma wasn't a big topic in the 1920s, right? And I don't know if everybody knows, but women used to be quite repressed in the olden days. Now, I'm definitely not a feminist because, in my opinion, that was just a way to split up the family unit. They went to women who were already upset and was like, "Hey, do you want to stand up for yourself?" "Well, yeah, I do." "Do you want equal and fair rights and to vote?" "Yeah, that sounds good." "Okay, then go to work. Let the government raise your child. That'll show these men who's boss." So they did, but without realizing the consequences. And now look at our family units across the country and the world. I mean, they're destroyed, mainly here. But anyway, good news is plenty of women are working from home now and being with their children more, and even some are homeschooling. And now we may hopefully have a new generation that has family core values again, like we used to when our ancestors, how they had a family going. All right, so anyway, generational trauma sometimes manifests as an addiction, right? So, like in some families, maybe there was like genocide. Remember the Salem witch trials? The lady was burned at the stake because she owned a bar. And this guy kept coming home drunk at night. And his wife got mad, so now she's a witch. We must, kill her for making a living, right? Well, think about the generations that came after all those terrible murders back then of these women. They inherited that trauma. So essentially they became afraid to be themselves, to speak out, to be healers or anything that, was frowned upon for women to do because they had that fear, of being burned alive was in their DNA. And these type of generational traumas carry on more than one generation. And sometimes they can manifest in someone's life as an addiction. It's not until you look at the trauma, ask your parents, ask your grandparents, if maybe they're still living, what your ancestors' lives were like. I bet somewhere you may find something horrific somewhere in your DNA that could have been the cause of your drinking. It's kind of like hoarding. Sometimes that comes from trauma in this lifetime, and you like hold sentimental value on stuff because you've experienced loss in some ways. But other times, hoarding can come out as a generational trauma manifested. So, say you had like Native Americans in your DNA and their land was taken, or your ancestors were really, really poor and they never had enough. So now you're living in this trauma out, hoarding, because unconsciously you're afraid to throw things away. You're afraid of going without. And now you have this lack mentality. And having a lack mentality is a generational curse. And sometimes lack can manifest as an addiction too. And sometimes this can become a shopping addiction. Every time you get some money, you're on Amazon ordering stuff that you just don't need, but you're getting that dopamine hit, right? And it all stems from that feeling of lack that could be deep down in your DNA. So, how do we work on this generational trauma, especially if we don't have access to our ancestors to even find out what kind of trauma there was? Well, the good news is that you don't have to know exactly what it was to work on it. So, let's first talk about meditation and self care. Let's talk about meditation first. Okay, so you can get into a meditative state and simply ask your ancestors what sort of trauma that they went through. Maybe you can find a guided meditation online somewhere or work with somebody who does guided meditations that can help you release any ancestral trauma. Maybe you can just set that intention before you do a meditation. Each time you meditate to release trauma that is no longer serving you and your family line, you can get into a daily habit of that, getting quiet with yourself, maybe in the mornings before you do anything else, and just see what comes up to be released. So you're probably thinking, okay, sounds fun and all, but how's that going to help me stay sober? Okay, getting into the present moment. So often drinking is a way to escape, right? Escape feelings, escape life, escape emotions, escape uncomfortable. When you practice meditation, you have to be present and you have to sit with yourself for a few minutes a day. Pretty soon you'll get comfortable doing this, and eventually you'll even look forward to it. You'll also develop better self awareness, and this is key when you're faced with triggers in real life because, life happens, and you have to learn how to handle it in the present moment now that you're sober. Okay, so you'll notice thoughts as soon as they arise and find something to do to hold them off. So, for example, if you have thoughts about drinking, instead of entertaining those thoughts, immediately find something else to distract yourself. Exercise is good for this. Any type of physical movement, even like just walking outside in nature, find any kind of movement, yoga, running, qigong. When you exercise, you get your blood pumping and moving through your body. Cravings for alcohol will just melt away and be replaced with a natural good feeling. So the next time you want to work on generational trauma, the next thing you want to do is to practice self-care. So let's see. Typically, you've probably lost all of your self-care by the time you wind up with a substance use disorder. But that's okay. you can work to get that back. Start a simple self care routine, and you can start small. Just try to go to bed at the same time every night. I found that it works best for me and my clients just to start with the physical body first. So that means you'll want to get a good night's sleep each night. Start putting nourishing things into your body and not stuff that's bad for you. It depends on like how long you've been drinking, but most likely you're going to want to do some sort of a healthy liver detox, a gut cleanse, or even a water fast. Fasting is a great way to work on healing your physical body, but it's often a hard one for people to start off with right out the gate. I mean, you're so used to putting something to your mouth, right? Especially if you're an alcoholic. So there's another thing. You can indulge that glass in your hand all the time thing if you need to, but replace it with distilled water. So you can carry around a glass or bottle of distilled water. I have the need a drink in my hand thing still. So I carry around a fully copper bottle that keeps my distilled water cold, refreshed, and clean. But you can use stainless or glass, just don't put it in plastic. Okay, so you have distilled water. Now you need good nutrient dense food, preferably raw, and sleep. So now you want to add in the exercise too. Then you want to cut out processed foods and junk. Grow your own food if you can. If not, try your local farmer's market and get some organic produce to give your body the nutrients that it needs to heal from all the, damage that you may have caused yourself with your addiction. Probably a good idea to find some good supplements and vitamins too, but you'll want to research these things. Maybe look at the parent companies who own the supplements. Like, where do they source their ingredients? Do they do any sort of lab testing? Are they transparent about these things? Do they microwave off all the nutrients before they sell it? Essentially, if you're not careful, you can wind up buying some really expensive junk that just does nothing. Okay, so work on your physical body. The next thing you want to do is deep breathing exercises. You could learn pranayama or belly breathing. Those are both great tools for learning how to handle emotions and cravings for alcohol when they come up. So, for example, if you are craving a drink because you saw an ad on YouTube for something, then maybe you can try some alternate nostril breathing, deep belly breathing, or maybe even some breath of fire. Literally like 10 minutes or so of this, and your craving should subside, and you'll be left with a much calmer state of mind. Now, your self care routine can be fun. It doesn't have to be a chore. You want to do stuff for yourself, like to show yourself that you love yourself. It's not something that you do because you're dreading. You want to make it fun to show yourself love and let your creativity just thrive. Okay, so another way that we can do this is to write or journal. When we write and just let the brain flow, sometimes we can get emotions out or feelings that we didn't even know existed. So it may take some time to get this practice to work for you. And you'll want to dedicate about 20 minutes or so to it. Just write, free write, no rules, and don't go back and edit it. Just let the words come out on paper or on your computer. Then, if you're lucky, you may start to see some of your soul come out, and you may find real trauma crop up to be released. Another therapeutic thing to do is to burn it. So, if something really juicy comes up for you, then to fully seal the deal of letting it go, set the piece of paper on fire and watch the smoke go. This will release the issues from the body in like a symbolic way. And I know that writing's not for everyone. So if that made you like cringe, then you may benefit more from the music or art route. So creative expression is healing. Creativity and critical thinking weren't really part of the school thing. So it's okay if it takes you a minute to get creativity back. But if you use your creativity, you'll be able to release emotions and find out some things that maybe you just didn't know about yourself, maybe that you're holding on to. All right, so another one that maybe you haven't really heard about as much, but it's an excellent way to connect to our ancestors' DNA, is to garden and cook. Not to mention, like, just the act of gardening and working with the land is honoring your ancestors too, because most ancestors worked with the land. They knew how to live in harmony with nature the way that God intended for us to do. So go back to the old ways of growing your own food. Pick it fresh and then going in to make a home cooked meal. The entire process is going to connect you to your ancestors and it will help you release trauma. With the added bonus of feeling good because now you have nutrition in your body and your whole family. Convenience is the problem. It's ruining us. Have you ever looked at like photos from the 30s, 40s, and 50s? Well, I guess they didn't have, but at least the 40s and 50s. And like compared them to pictures of today? I mean, there's like many things that have changed, but one of the biggest problems is everybody's love of convenience. Um, and I don't really remember reading about convenience in any of like the ancient religious texts either. Do you, like, no, I'm pretty sure they talked about the fruits of your labor and stuff like that, not like convenience. To me, convenience is almost, kind of like lazy, slothfulness, glutton, those kind of things. Maybe not that extreme, but it definitely leans more to than, working hard and being appreciative of what you have. But anyway, so your health is important. And it's not just your physical health, but your spiritual health, your emotional health. Um, but you need to start with your physical health. I mean, it's the easiest. You can pretty much start with any of them you want, but it's easier if you start with your physical health. So, like, if you don't have a big, huge spot of land to grow anything on, that's fine. Like I said earlier, you can go to a farmer's market or you can find organic foods at some stores that maybe, are organic. But if you don't know how to cook, look it up. Or find some books, ask somebody. Cooking food from home is it's really great for healing yourself. And the food will have a high vibration when you give it to your family too, because you put your love and soul into it. And if you bless your food first, that you will definitely raise the vibration of it even more. Okay, so after your physical body, you're going to want to work on your emotions. And emotions. These bad boys they can cause a relapse real quick, right? And somehow there's validation behind it. So, like, have you ever, well, he made me mad, I'll show him. I'm going to drink vodka all night and mess up my sobriety. How easy is it to talk yourself into a relapse because of an emotion? Maybe one that you don't want to feel, like anger, guilt. Guilt's a big one for a lot of people. Masking and repressing, like, these kind of emotions will only cause you more issues down the road. If you truly don't want to relapse, then you're going to have to keep your emotions in check. Remember, you run them. They don't run you. So there's a ton of different like meditation methods that cover this. You can picture your emotions like clouds in the sky and watch them go by. Uh, for me, and what I usually suggest to clients is choose positive emotions that you want to feel each day and then feel them. So, like, for example, happiness and joy are high vibrational feelings, right? So wake up every morning, find something to do that brings you joy, and relish in the feeling. And make a note, a mental note, or even write it down of what you felt like when you felt that joy. So if dance around your kitchen in the morning naked if you want to, if that's your thing, but do something that brings you some joy, and it doesn't have to be very long, like 2 or 3 minutes. If it brings that feeling, that's what you want to feel. And remember, all day long, go back to that same joyful feeling. And find a way to make these positive emotions a reality every day. This way, when a negative emotion does come up, because they do, learn to sit with it and just be present. I know it sucks at first, right? Especially because you've ran away from these dang emotions for so long. But if you don't want the anger controlling you, then trust me, sit with it. Even find something positive, like to channel it. So sometimes for me, I write, and you can tell if I'm mad because I'm violently hitting my keyboard. But I often create some really good works that way. And then when it's over, the anger's gone. It's not lingering. Or another way you could channel anger is to work out or like punch a punching bag or run a mile if that's your thing. Or if you're feeling super brave, just sit in your chair, close your eyes, and feel the anger. Then look at it honestly and clearly and ask yourself, why am I angry? Then list why you're angry. And then ask yourself, is it worth letting this anger have control? Or are you going to continue sitting there with it a few more minutes until it finally passes on? Now, quick note, this is not to be confused with ruminating, because if you're doing that, you're instigating yourself, and that's a surefire way to talk yourself right back into a drink. So it's the same thing with guilt. When guilt pops up, tell your inner child inside, or even your past version of yourself, that you forgive them. Sit with the guilt and tell yourself that you're just not going to allow it to take control, and you're not that person anymore. Guilt is such a lower vibration that you don't want to sit in it for too long, but it should pass over once you forgive yourself. Or switch to gratitude. Gratitude, such a great way to shift out of a lower vibrational state. Start by listing like 3 or 4 things that you're grateful for. After you indulge in some gratitude, the other emotions will start to fade out of the background and they'll have less power over you. Well, now you have an idea of some things that you could try on your own for relapse prevention. And just to be sure, I'm not hating on any kind of facilities at all. There are very great treatment facilities and rehabs out there doing awesome things and saving lives. Some of them are just busy, and some of them just don't know how to implement a relapse prevention plan that is unique to each individual. And sometimes they just literally can't. I mean, we don't have enough help in this community. But now that you have an idea of some things that you can work on your own for relapse prevention, then if you want to try to reach out to some rehabs, call and ask them about individualized relapse prevention plans and see what they explain to you how they do that. Um, or if it's some kind of a generic answer, then it may be that they don't. But this same thing goes if you're looking for a therapist, a counselor, or a coach. Ask them if anyone with experience with addiction is there. Do any of the doctors maybe have history of addiction? I've been to a rehab where the doctor running it was a recovering opiate addict, and he was great because you knew that he could relate to what you were going through, and he was super open about his past. And that just works when you meet somebody who's been on the path and they have got what you want. They're sober and they're doing it. It works. So find out if the rehab therapist or coach has lived experience with addiction. Then ask if they have a relapse prevention plan and if it's unique to the individual, and then ask them to maybe describe an example. If so, chances are this will be a good route for you to take. Follow your intuition and remember that you can get sober and stay sober. Relapse is not part of the equation. I mean, yeah, it happens, but do not trick yourself into getting like a free pass because I know plenty of people who relapsed and it was their last. They overdosed, and many of them are very young. So it's just dangerous out there in the addiction world anymore. Make sure that you guys take addiction seriously, folks. And remember to always unleash your healing vibes.